the funds to show the value of these contracts. Why the important procurement? I mean, it's about collaborative working in a fragmented sector. So in the sort of construction sector, we realise that if people are building, they might be very small build. It might be a 10 sort of bedroom space unit, and it's only a short term. So for a plumber, it's a very short term. That apprentice cannot complete that work, that contract, so they'll be made redundant. So looking at how we can ensure that everyone is supporting each other and all the suppliers and contractors supporting each other through this process. I'll come on to what we sort of put in place for that aspect. Again, I spoke about supporting small, medium enterprises and local economy. So again, if you've got a chain, if you're going to subcontract, then we expect within that contract that you support local enterprises, whether through your chain or as an added value of what else can you do to help them, with whether it's a business plan, whether it's sort of letting them buy into your deals for larger contracts so they get discounted rates. So it's looking at all aspects of how you can contribute to that local economy and local employment. I said before, we've always done this. We're best placed to support sort of larger corporate businesses because we know our customers. We do a lot of behavioural economic sort of research. We do segmentation work. We can target the needs of what that programme is. If it's unemployment, if it's a work placement, if it's a graduate placement, if it's setting up a sort of self-build enterprise, we know in each area roughly which kind of customers are interested in those areas. So we have the people so we can make it successful in terms of a partnership approach. Critically within procurement, we have a procurement team where they're very business focused, cheapest cost, as with any organisation I'd imagine. It's embedded the ethos with staff critically across our whole business. We have about 2,300 staff. It's embedded within the objectives. People understand what social value means. I think one of the speakers earlier was asking, how do we embed it within staff? We set up a pledges system within our staff. So in the corporate sector, it would be like volunteering. Within our sort of area, we deliver around 300 individual small projects. So we've listed them and staff contribute towards those. They're given time to contribute, give their time. But we started at the chief exec level so that the senior leaders across the group committed time. And a lot of them have continued mentoring programs or projects and working with staff on the ground, which has been really beneficial. And with our procurement team, we basically set them a task right at the beginning. Here's a competition. Right, all the procurement you guys do locally, who's building in social value within their work. So it was basically that embedded, right, we're going to get higher than you. And it showed them the value of what they could do. A little community project, working with mental health young people and older people around that. There's a green space, so they worked with the gardening contractors to get them to help transfer and transport equipment and basically help dig up. Simple things like that, embedded, right, actually we're delivering something. It made them see the story at the other end. In terms of what's the outcome for us, and like I said, we've been on a 3-year journey, and the Act's been in place for a couple of years. A key part of our sort of procurement was we procured for our repairs and maintenance service nationally, and we have 3 large contractors working with us. And through that embedding over a 10-year process, we've got around 230 apprenticeships. For that, apprenticeships was important because there was works that were going to go on a continuous basis. We've also embedded that within our new development social housing build workers. Again, the developers are committed to apprenticeships, work placements, simple DIY sessions. You know, makes a big sort of difference in a local community. In Tower Hamlets, we worked with the Bengali young women, and the contractors came and delivered basic DIY sessions because they wanted that, and they have now gone out and trained other sort of people in the community. So the impact is really big in terms of what that delivers. A key part of this is working, we are not the experts. So we worked with CITB, Construction Industry Training Bureau. Using the people out there who can deliver this, who have the expertise, is a key part. We work with a lot of social enterprises who are very good at doing a lot of this work locally, volunteering organisations. So again, we don't do everything, but we work with others who can deliver this. Bear with me. I have some additional notes somewhere, but I've got that. As I said before, it's about our key priorities around social value, social dividend. It's employment skills, financial inclusion, energy, but also digital inclusion. So again, one of our contractors, we're going through a process where we're all becoming agile. We're purchasing a high level of IT equipment across the business, laptops, PDA whatever you call it, all those kind of equipments. So Dell, who's our provider that we procured, can't physically, because of their office space and the service they provide, it's a sales organisation, the section we're working with, can't give apprenticeship work placements. But what they can and have done is for every equipment we buy, there's a reduced rate, and that's a cash sum that we get back. That's an added value part because the contract is still cheaper than, in terms of procurement of what we wanted. So for that cash sum, I think the first tranche we had about 15,000. We invested that in a couple of our foyers that house 2 different foyers. One of them houses about 20-odd young people, homeless young people who are just going through the transition and life skills. And we've kitted out a whole IT suite for them, Wi-Fi'd this system. So now we can deliver employment skills, life chances programs. The value of that is tremendous. Already within the first 2 weeks of installing that, we had like 48 young different people accessing different services and training. So that was something much needed, and that's the way they showed their value. As part of this, we've also set up sort of service improvement groups. So every provider we work with, we meet them on a regular basis, but we've also set KPIs, key performance indicators, on the large contracts specifically, and the smaller contracts where they're just adding on top of what they're already doing. It's more about, how can we help you evidence social return? Here's a case study. Here's a young person. So we're giving them the stories for their PR. Corporate sector, CSR, PR is great. A lot of them want pretty photos. Fine, we can do that for you, and we can measure that for you and can give that back to you. So that's our partnership in terms of, give us what we need, but we in turn will give something back to you to evidence in terms of your plans, what you need to show. I spoke earlier about in terms of the fragmented sort of sector in terms of how you provide support. So within our repairs and maintenance and new development, a lot of our contractors were saying, it's great, but we can only provide an apprenticeship post for 3 months. The training is for a year or 2 years. So working with CITB, we established an enterprise called Evolve. It is a shared apprenticeship scheme, who basically can provide that, basically it's like a recruitment agency. They will recruit the apprentice for you, and they will shift them around different contracts. And it's not just with our contracts, it's any contract. So we have local authorities, other housing associations within London who provide this. And there's other schemes that CITB have out of London as well in a similar front. So it's helping people to deliver what they need to deliver in that process. If that makes sense, so one apprentice could go through 3 different placements with 3 different contractors. One of them, ultimately, when they look at the new pool and the future labour, have a qualified person who's been through that skill now with different providers. And these people are going back straight into employment with these contractors. Interesting part, or difficult part, measuring impact in SROI. Why did we start on this journey? We had to evidence to our management board, to our stakeholders, and ultimately our customers, why we're spending this money in terms of sustainable communities, social dividend, not on the homes. We had to show the value of what we deliver, and the way we could do that in the easiest way initially was SROI, which is basically a basic accountancy tool. It's more, if we've directly helped someone into employment, we could put a figure against that. So we started on that simpler journey. As I explained, we have 9 housing associations. We had to put a mechanism in that everyone could do this easily. So again, as I said, it's trading financial value for social value. Our finance department loved it. It helped with their value for money returns. It helped us sort of show the value for money in terms of how we're spending our money. And it helped us focus our resources on the right needs. So if we knew that a project or something wasn't delivering something, we changed that, we stopped that, and we sort of thought about what could be delivered, what's the need amongst our customer base. And it's very much, what we deliver is based on what our customers need. So we're not coming up with projects for the sake of projects, which historically we did. It's what is the need, which is the locality. So it does vary across the UK in terms of where we deliver services. It also helped us tell our story to our investors, in the large banks, basically, where we're getting loans from. And if you look at it on a commercial side, in terms of why, if you want to do a business case, it increases the house prices. If we're looking after the local economy, if we're increasing that, if we're helping employment, not ourselves, totally, but if we're helping that journey, there's a difference in the way that people see the house costs in those areas. And it also helps ultimately stabilise fixed-term tenancies. If we can help someone into employment or on their journey to wherever they want to go, it makes them feel happy about where they're living. It spreads it amongst their families in terms of health and well-being as well. So again, it helps people stay in their homes and be more positive. But at the end of the day, on a really, if you want to look at it quite critically why we're doing this, it also helps reduce our arrears. It helps us, by what we deliver, helps us maintain those homes, and it supports our customers. 2 outcomes we use currently, social return investment that I spoke about. It's out there, it's in the government's green book. They're validated figures, they're the only ones we used. We had Richards here somewhere, an organisation called Make It Happen, who came in and spent quite a long time looking at everything we do and, you know, literally auditing everything. And it acknowledged, it gave us the value, it gave us a social value mark in terms of the social SROI aspect of our work. What he did say was there's 50% that we could show more. Some of that's linked to the HACT work in terms of the wellbeing valuation. Again, we've embedded that within the business. That's looking at the people value. So we're looking at if it's helped reduce unemployment benefits at the moment on SROI. In terms of wellbeing, it will show the value to that individual. We're testing it, we're working on it. We've worked with HACT and Lizzie on that. But we're not confident that our staff are measuring things correctly, so we're not showing those values at the moment. That's still another journey of 6 months down the line. Just to give a quick example, last year we spent about 3 million, if you include staff and project and resources, in terms of our community development, sustainable communities kind of area of work. And for SROI, we could show that for every £1 we invested, there was a value of £12 return. Details, I'm not going to go through that, but it literally breaks it down to our financial inclusion work and our employment skills work. And even our employment skills is broken down further in terms of apprenticeships, volunteering, work placement. So we break it down as far as possible. If there's no value out there in the Green Book, we don't mention it, we don't use it. We just look at the interventions. And a case study, just to show the benefits into the corporate sector, Devonshire's is one of our legal providers. They employ a paid work placement for 6 months. Every year, so the 2 people every year. And the value they've received from that, Devonte started with them, unemployed young person, at the edge of gang issues where he lived. He's gone into this and he's secured a job with them. He's permanently employed. He's training as a legal paralegal. But again, the other people are going through that process. One shifted to the IT department, others gone on to further education. So the value it shows to you in terms of the provider to us is the value of those people coming through their organisation and young talent, basically, that they're recruiting. And again, what we could do was, in terms of SROI, show them how that value is at the end. I'm talking too long, aren't I? Another model in action. I'm going to stop there. Okay. That's it.
Thank you very much, Bina. And as Bina kind of got onto there, some of the stuff around measurement and the HACT and Daniel Fujiwara model, and Lizzie's been working a huge amount on that, and we'll now go into more detail on that. So.
Great. Thanks. Just whilst my presentation gets set up, I'll explain. I am now working at Symmetrica as Social Impact Manager, but last week I was Head of Social Impact at HACT, so I've just switched over. But the 2 organisations work together on this work anyway, so it's entirely relevant for me to talk about it from either side. So I'll just, whilst we're waiting for that one to set up, HACT basically started working in social impact measurement about 2 years ago after a bit of research in the housing sector to find out what different housing providers were doing in terms of measuring their social impact. It turned out we called 32 different housing providers and stopped because there were 30 different frameworks or approaches or methodologies that were reported to us. And critically, nobody was particularly happy with the approach that they were taking. It wasn't giving them the answers that they wanted, or it was costing them too much money, or a bit of both potentially. So HACT basically thought maybe there's something we can do to support the sector to tackle this and to do this in a better way. And that's where HACT started talking to Symmetrica, which, as has been mentioned, is Daniel Fujiwara's consultancy. Daniel Fujiwara is an economist, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail around the work that that's led on to when I link it with my presentation. Are we having any luck? I mean, I can probably go through it without the presentation. What can I say? So basically, the approach that we've taken is based around a method called wellbeing valuation. How many people are familiar with it now? I've been it's kind of out there. So the way that it works is we access big national data sets that already exist. So something like the British Household Panel Survey, which is it's a UK government data set collected every year. It was about 10,000 people every year, but it's recently gone up to about 80,000. And here we go. And so within that survey, there's a question at the start that says, how satisfied are you with your life on a scale of 0 to 10? Okay? And then the rest of the survey goes on for hundreds and hundreds of pages, asking questions around employment, around volunteering, whether you go to the zoo, how much time you spend with your family, a range of huge amount of questions. What we can do is basically isolate the relationship between life satisfaction and any one of those questions in that survey. And the way that we do this is using sophisticated statistical analysis, basically, which controls for all the other factors or cancels them out effectively. So whether you got married in that year, whether you something amazing happened to you, you went on a fantastic holiday, we can isolate the relationship. So if you move from unemployment to employment, we can understand the impact it has on your life satisfaction. Because these surveys are done over such a huge amount of people, so over 10,000 people, and the same people do these surveys each year, we can get a really robust calculation of the life satisfaction impact of moving from unemployment to employment, for example. Okay? So if we can jump into this, it should make sense. So if we look at this guy, he's just moved off benefits into a job, all right? And he's got an increased income in his pocket of just under £4,000. But that figure doesn't really tell you the whole story of what that move means to him, okay? What the value of that is. What we can do using wellbeing valuation is actually put a monetary value on that, okay? Worth £10,767. So I've talked a little bit about how this wellbeing valuation works, but let's just finish that off. So these are the data sets that we used. So as I mentioned, we can isolate the impact of one variable on life satisfaction. We can look at this huge data set and find out, on average, for example, if somebody moves from unemployment to employment, they go 1 index point up that life satisfaction scale. What we can then do is access data on income and find the equivalent amount of money that results in that same uplift in life satisfaction. So how much does it take, on average, someone to move 1 index point up that life satisfaction point? Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, cool. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, how wellbeing valuation works. And this is what we've used to create values for housing provider community investment activities, so that housing providers can understand the social value that they're creating through those activities. Okay. This approach is being taken across government departments. It's part of the Green Book now. Health don't use it because they've got a slightly different approach, but all other central government departments have or are currently using it. And this is just to show that there's, in no sense is this just a housing sector phenomena. It's being used across different sectors, and this was a result of some research funded by DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. So basically, anyone who struggles to demonstrate the value of their work, wellbeing valuation is a really good method to use because it can capture the difference that it makes to individual well-being and put a monetary figure on it. Okay, so why has there been this appetite to measure social value so much in the housing sector? If we kind of take for granted that general feeling of wanting to understand the difference that you make and informing decisions to make every pound sweat, if you like, we can look at these other things as well, which I'm sure will ring true if you work in housing. The reductions in public services, housing providers are increasingly finding themselves stepping in to fill gaps that are being left by public services withdrawing. Value for money regulations now stipulate that boards must maintain a robust assessment of, amongst other things, their social returns. So it's now part of the regulations that you need to be measuring and demonstrating this stuff. And basically, if you ever talk about social value or social impact, you need to be measuring it. You can't ever really say or state that you create social value without being able to evidence as much. Bean has mentioned the Public Services Social Value Act and procurement. And just in general, across all sectors, there's an increasing drive to base decisions on evidence and data. Kind of anecdote or gut feeling doesn't really wash anymore. So HACT, I'm going to say HACT rather than we, I have to train myself to do that now, published this guide back in March of last year. And this is an introduction to social impact measurement and wellbeing valuation in the context of housing. It contains the social value bank, and this is a set of values that we derived using the wellbeing valuation approach. And these are relevant to community investment activities of housing providers. But critically, they're not specific, they're not kind of specific to housing providers as well. They're the values that are derived from these national data sets. So whilst they're relevant to community investment activities of housing providers, they can be applied by any organisation that's doing similar work within communities. As part of the research that we did with housing providers was the reasons that people found the existing approaches troublesome or difficult were that they were resource heavy, they took too much staff effort, and they didn't give people the answers that they wanted. So we've developed this cost-appropriate, lightweight, but insight-rich framework to allow you to measure and value your social impact. So there's more of a strategic overview that will give you an idea of your impact across very different areas of your community investment. And I'll talk about that briefly in a minute. Within this guide, you can also, there's some support to understand what your results mean and what to do with them. You can download that for free from the HACT website, which I'll put up in a bit. And we developed this bit of work with a group of leading housing providers. It was funded by Affinity Sutton and Catalyst, but we also brought in other housing providers of different sizes and place-based organisations to inform the work, to make it as useful as possible to the whole housing sector. Okay, so this is the social value bank. I'm not expecting you to be able to see these values, but just to give you a brief idea of what it looks like, it's split into different themes. So at the top, we've got employment and training, and then we've got local area and crime. Then we've got some health outcomes, some financial inclusion outcomes, and some youth type outcomes. And that's to represent the kind of main areas of work that housing providers are working in currently. And then we've got the values over on the right-hand side. So these are all values that represent the uplift in well-being that's experienced by people when they experience these outcomes on the left. We've got it differentiated by region. So we've got national average within London and outside of London. And that was driven by the data as to where the biggest differences were of experiencing those outcomes. And then we've also got them differentiated by age, because if you experience a move into employment or if you start regularly volunteering, it affects you differently as to whether you're under 25 or whether you're over 50, for example. So we've captured that in that differentiation. So we've got under 25, 25 to 49, and over 50. And obviously that's a huge age group, especially with the ageing population, and HACT are looking at kind of differentiating that further in the future. So if you think about this, the work that HACT and Symmetrica have done kind of covers the bit in the red ellipse there. We've identified the outcomes that are relevant. We can value the well-being using a measure of life satisfaction, and how this creates value to society, basically by aggregating it all up. What we can't do is the first bit that's outside of that red circle-ish, squash circle, and that's what the community investment programs actually deliver. And this is where we've created some tools to help housing providers, or anyone really, to be able to attach these values to their activity. And here are the tools here. The first one is a HACT tool called Community Insights. And what this does is it brings together over 100 government open data sources and basically maps it onto an area, a neighbourhood that you can define. So a housing provider would upload their stock and define their neighbourhoods, and then you can either click on one of the indicators, such as job seekers allowance claimants, and it will pull up something of a heat map, like you can see there, so you can see how different areas fare for that particular indicator. What you can then do is pull off a report for a neighbourhood that you've defined. So you might just draw on a map, and then you can create a report, and it will give you a 50-page report on all of that government data that's linked into that site, if that makes sense. So you'll see there's things around vulnerable groups, around population, about housing, about crime. All of those are government data sources that are kept up to date all the time. So that's a really useful tool if you're interested in that. And what that does is it identifies the need in the area. It tells you what you need to do in terms of interventions, okay? So that's the start of the journey, if you like. What HACT have then done is created Value Insight, and this is something of a social impact sister site to Community Insight. This has the social value bank at its heart, so all of those values in the table that I just showed you, And this allows you to to set up your programs and your projects, and you can effectively report on your social impact through that tool by it'll pull in those values that are relevant to your activity. So that's called Value Insight. But one of the main bits of feedback we got when we did the initial research was that people complained there wasn't any consistency. People were measuring social impact in a variety of different ways, and it wasn't making sense. So what HACT wanted to do was make all this freely available to the housing sector as well, because if it was free, then more people would use it, and so there would be greater consistency. So you can download the value calculator from the HACT website, which is effectively a clever spreadsheet that has the social value bank wired into it. So all of those values, and you can just upload a snapshot of your community investment results, how many people have got into work, how many people are playing football regularly, how many people feel safer in their neighbourhood as a result of your activity. It'll apply the social values and give you that social impact at the end. Okay. Critically, in any social impact measurement approach, it's important to acknowledge some of those outcomes would have happened anyway if it wasn't for you. Okay, and that's a really tricky thing to do. You can never have two worlds that you can examine. You know, in one world your intervention happened, in the other it didn't. You can never look at those two worlds. So you have to find a way to acknowledge and consider that. What HACT did was included some standard deadweight figures. So deadweight being what would have happened anyway, are actually included in the model. And these came out in last year from this HCA, the Homes and Communities Agency's report. So, for example, I think it's 27% of any health intervention is automatically subtracted as it would have happened anyway if it wasn't for you. So it's a kind of low effort way to consider deadweight within your social impact results. Okay, and just briefly, I was asked to cover the future, and this is kind of a HACT development plan with some Symmetrica involvement, of course. We are just about to, I say that, very soon homelessness values are going to be entered into the social value bank. So that's the value of moving from, say, rough sleeping to a hostel, or from vulnerably housed to being securely housed. So the impact of well-being to the individual of that. Because obviously one of the key things is within the British Household Panel Survey, you have to be in a household to actually contribute to that data. So we're now addressing that through some great homelessness data that we were able to access. We're just starting some research on the social value of attributes of the home, so looking at the impact in terms of thermal comfort or space or security, so looking more at that as well. There'll be values developed around that. We're also doing some scoping work at the moment around secondary benefits, so not just the value to the individual through wellbeing valuation, but looking at how someone moving from unemployment to employment saves the government money potentially through those what we call secondary benefits. Impact on the bottom line is also something that HACT are looking at, how a community investment outcome might benefit the business in some sense. The Value Insight tool will be developed with the user group who are subscribing. Social Value Bank itself will grow, just more values will come in, and also HACT are working on a new model for tenant satisfaction surveys. So that kind of looks at the different value associated with community investment outcomes. This is where HACT want to go to. So you can look at these different types of value, but not just in terms of community investment, also in terms of the bricks and mortar work of the business. So looking at a kind of whole organisation assessment of value. So kind of watch that space. And that's the HACT website, so you can go and take a look at the tools you can download for free and have a look at your social impact. And that is just a selection of some of the housing providers that HACT have been working with on their social value work. That's it. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lizzie. And finally now we're going to hear from Helen Wills at First Arc about the work that they've been doing up there as a more local provider.
Yeah, I won't try and repeat too much because I think we do cover some of both speakers. So First Arc is a medium-sized housing group. We have 14,000 homes across Knowsley. And I don't know if people know Knowsley, but it's on the outskirts of Liverpool. And it's not really, or wasn't really, a place. Parts are in Lancashire, part of it was in Liverpool. And in the post-war years, they moved people out to rather nice at the time, actually. A lot of people wanted to go to housing estates outside Liverpool. Over the last 20 years or so, we have all those high levels of deprivation. There is massive unemployment. You maybe see in the news the schools in terms of education are not doing too well at the moment, you know, sort of low skills levels, some inward investment coming in, but it's been fairly low the last few years. So it's got all those indices of deprivation. And First Arc was actually Knowsley Housing Trust. And I think what could be quite interesting about this presentation is the way we structured the company to actually meet the needs of our communities and wider. So we've got major ambitions for growth. We won't just be in Knowsley, we want to go further than that, but actually some of it's the way we structured our housing company, which could be interesting. So I'm not talking all the time. I think we're going to play a video, aren't we?
First Arc is a group of companies working together to create success, which provides corporate business services and strategic direction to the rest of the group. Each company in the group contributes to the success by providing a range of services and inspiring solutions. The group consists of KHT, Oriel, Vivarc and One Arc. First Arc is a social business. Every part of the group adds social value and generates social investments. The group operates a unique business model, the First Arc formula, which gives communities the power and confidence to achieve. Also, we have developed a new set of solutions to better meet our customers' needs. As an employer, we are expanding, offering a range of exciting work experience and career opportunities. We are developing as a national thought leader and influencer, and have joined Social Enterprise UK's Social Economy Alliance to collaborate on giving power to local economies, communities and social enterprises in advance of the next general election. KHT is our housing association and is facing many new challenges. Welfare reform came into place in April 2013, and since then we have taken on additional staff and work with partners to help support our customers with their rent payments and dealing with arrears. Even through these challenging times, we are keeping rents as low as we possibly can. At KHT, we're continually improving our repairs services and improving customer satisfaction. We're building new quality homes which meet the housing need in the borough. Hear from John and Eileen, who recently moved into one of our newly built bungalows.
And now we're settled, it makes life just a lot easier, a lot carefree.
Eileen, if she was ill, she had to stay upstairs. So consequently I was looking after her, I run up and downstairs, but then I had a heart attack, so I couldn't run up and downstairs any longer. So when this became available, it was heaven sent, wasn't it?
Wasn't it? It's nice atmosphere, it just couldn't, the past is gone now because we're here and it's not like, we've got what we want now.
You wouldn't change it now, you wouldn't change it for the world.
KHT is continuing to build new homes for social and affordable rent. Under its new brand, Oriel, we are committed to working with partners to build new homes for outright sale, diversifying housing and finance options, extending the range of choice for home buyers. We will encourage people already in the borough to buy a home and stay in Knowsley, and attract new people from outside the area to buy an Oriel home. Vivarc is a social enterprise providing facilities management. This means that social value is at the heart of the company and profit are reinvested into the group to fund services for the communities we work in. We provide services for KHT and will be extending into business and other sectors such as health, education and commercial property management. At Vivarc, we're committed to generating employment and training with a group-wide promise to ensure that 5% of our workforce is recruited as apprentices both in trade and office positions. Hear from Connor, a Vivarc apprentice, talking about his experiences.
At the moment I'm doing painting and decorating. I've been doing joinery for the past year. I enjoy it, the lads always help you out as well, so it's not, I don't feel pressured, and if you mess up you don't feel pressured. Apprentice is a good way to learn new skills and get qualifications, but you're still getting paid and making new friends and having a laugh at the same time. So
One Arc is a social investment charity, which means we are investing in the local economy and giving other people and organisations the opportunity to invest in and create social value and financial return. We aim to deliver opportunities to improve the lives of people living and working in Knowsley. Some schemes that are taking place include Win a Shop, Pass the Buck, Eco Teams and World Merit. An objective of One Arc is to develop connections with relevant partners, working closely with them to deliver our aims. We actively seek partners to work with and invest. Hear from Emily from World Merit, who will talk about the One Arc partnership.
World Merit was developed to engage young people with entrepreneurship, global citizenship and to take part in social action. The appeal of One Arc was the fact that they've got the community at heart. You can see that they're really taking huge steps to try and engage with the community and also to encourage people to raise their aspirations and also become involved in local community projects. And it's really good to see a team that genuinely cares about the work that it's doing.
A lot has changed in a couple of years. We have been innovative in our approach and focused on the needs of our customers and communities. We are delivering a wide range of solutions and services, all focused on the same goal: to create success and deliver social impact. This is just the start of our journey. What could you add to our formula for success as a partner, investor or employee? Find out more about us and how you can get involved at www.firstarc.com.
Okay, so you might be sort of saying, well, what's different and what's different about the company? It's the way that the company's been structured. So we have a mixture of charitable, social businesses and an overarching holding company, if you like. And over the last 6 months or so, we have been recruiting people from the private sector. So the whole thing around we need to become more commercial has been really important. We've also started talking about profit, because we are saying that we want to invest in our communities rather than just give to our communities. So that's where the difference is. We've got a manifesto. I won't go through that. It's the usual stuff, and it goes back to what you were saying, and I think we're all doing the same sort of thing, you know, digitally included, greener, fairer, all that sort of thing, well connected, and that's some of the key areas we're working on at the moment. Best of sectors. Now, I put this in because I think it gives a very good example of what we are doing. I believe in simplicity. I've worked in regeneration. I've been through all measuring things and doing things differently and being innovative. And when I got there in September, we always did the social accounts and a great big long sort of book of social accounts and what does it mean. So we've come up with these social accounts, which just shows very simply what we have achieved. So we did create 134 jobs last year. We've been using HAT. We've been looking at how we measure energy usage and savings. And that's the sort of stuff on the communities, using the HAT and other wellbeing calculators. That's what we got through. So it just very simply says, what have we achieved? What have we achieved in the economic impact? The other slight thing that worries me is we talk a lot about social value. Having worked in both public and private sectors, I think social has other connotations. And it goes back to that definition we were talking about this morning. I'm trying to get embedded into our organisation the word economic impact as well. Economic is as important as social, and how do we get that balance? Because we talk about social, but what does that actually mean to that person down the road who actually is unemployed, has been for 20 years, got the bedroom tax, we have to move them, and what we need to do is put money in their pocket so they're economically and socially better off. And that's the way we're working at the moment. So probably a slightly bit more commercial, probably slightly uncomfortable for some people, but we've got to move that way on some of our plans for the future. And it's all about growth and growth in the way which is fairly commercial, but at the same time, everything we do is going to be reinvested for our communities. So everything we do will be reinvested for our communities. And we are going to create that social and economic impact that we need. So I was just thinking about, I got told to look at learning from experience. Just where I am at the moment, I think culturally what's quite interesting is places like KHT came from the public sector, and then we're trying to talk about commerciality and the private sector notions. that's that culture clash, and how are we reconciling that at the moment. That's one of the issues we're looking at. How do we make decisions that are quick? You know, you're embedded within public sector bureaucracy and some private sector bureaucracy, and actually making quick decisions and being flexible. Our structure and systems, we have numerous IT systems which have probably come from different organisations as the organisations developed. Behaviours, we talk about customer-centric, but actually most people sit behind the desk and do some work, and yes, we have lots of customers, but how do we actually make them think about our customers? And on the same time, how do we get our customers to start behaving like our customers? You know, why should they be able to just go and drop the litter anywhere? We have to pick it up, damage their houses, and how do we get that? So it's a joint responsibility, and how do we share that joint responsibility? We talked about impact assessment, I'm not going into that. And the other things around partners, and how do we actually make sure we get the right partners to work with us. So that's from our side, I think, you know, culturally as an organisation, how do we take the best from public sector, private sector and other sectors to get that type of business right. This is about collaborating with partners. I'm having some interesting conversations with some of our partners. They've been used to just coming to us and going, right, can we have £30,000 and we're not going to tell you how we're spending it and it's all great, and if you don't do that, we're going to go under. So you get that little threatening, and I've been to our board, I've had loads of them already, and actually what I'm going back to them and say, no, you now have to start fitting in with us. We are a business, we want to invest, we want to recycle our funds, we want to make sure our values to some extent align, we want to understand what we mean by investment. If we're going to give you £20,000, we want either a social return, a social value return, I want to see a financial return, are you going to start paying it back at some stage? Or actually by working in partnership with you, can we work together to bring a whole range of funding in, and I'm calling that a partnership return. I do want to see some business plans. I don't expect to see details. I expect to see a business plan. I want to know where they're going, what they think they're going to do to get sustainable. Innovation, I love that word. We all innovate every day, but we're all doing the same thing. But we have got to get innovative and start thinking about doing things differently, and actually that comes to how we collaborate. I mean, you've probably all seen it. I mean, I worked in Oldham for a year. We had 34 different organisations in a very small area, all doing advice and guidance. When we looked at the cost of commissioning, it was costing us £4 million. We're all doing it. I see it now in Knowsley. You talk to an organisation, so what you're doing, we're delivering this, this and this. Well, why are you delivering that when they up the road are doing the same thing? Can you start working together? So we need to bring that challenge in. We need to be more challenging. We need to work with a broader range of partners. Public sector, private sector. Very key on impact assessment. We don't just use HACT. HACT is really good and it's been really worthwhile, but we're looking at lots of different ways of measuring, qualitative, quantitative, all different ways. And when I say value for money at the end, it's public money. I've worked in regeneration for a long time, and I think sometimes we forget that. We had that long discussion this morning, but a lot of the money we're using is public money, and that needs to be used for the public benefit with the help of professionals and our communities to spend that money. And that's the end, and that's our priorities, but the usual stuff. Okay?
Brilliant.
Right.
Thank you very much, Helen. 3 really interesting and different presentations, but with some common themes running across, I think. We've now got about 20 minutes for Q&A, so some time for some good discussion. We've got 2 microphones. Because this is being recorded, can you please wait for the microphone before you ask a question? Otherwise, the people who are watching on the internet won't know what you've said. Do we have any first questions, please? Brilliant, thank you. Cheers.
Really interesting speakers this morning, very enlightening. My name is Helen Skur, I'm from ARC People and Communities, nothing to do with ARC, First ARC I would say. Helen, I'm interested in the change, the sea change that's taken place within First ARC, and really interested in your comments on how challenging it's been within the organisation to actually change your internal working culture. Now, quite a lot about the work that's happening up in the Northwest and some really exciting projects, some of the work you're doing around sort of buy a shop or sell a shop, but also some of the tensions that may have caused corporately as a business, and just interested in your comments on that.
Right, they have, I mean, I've only been there since September, but what we have got is we've got a whole change transformation programme going on called Evolve, and that is working with a private sector consultancy, but they're also social business, And what we're trying to do there is we're looking at what skills, it's usual stuff actually, you know, if you worked in the private sector and the public sector, what skills are required, what capabilities are required, how do you bring commerciality back into a business which has, you know, to some extent come out of the public sector. How do we get the staff, a lot of work's been done with the staff around what do we mean by customer service, why is a customer having to ring 5 times and how much is that costing us? So trying to put what efforts we're putting into to some sort of monetary value, to be honest with you. So some of it's around that. It's not easy. We've put a 3-year programme in. We are just going through a restructuring. This is the second one in 18 months. It is difficult, but I think for an organisation like First Arc to be sustainable, we have to keep going through it. I don't think it'll be the last restructure, having been in the private sector and the public sector. It'll be fairly continuous, but I think in the next 3 years we will have a strategic business that can take growth forward, but actually put the customer at the heart of that. Does that? See, I'd have to talk about the Evolve programme more, and maybe I could send you some information on that.
No, I just think it's interesting. We work with a number of organisations across the country, public and private sector, and what you've just outlined in terms of some of the achievements, we know that some of the other housing providers are starting that sort of transitional phase now, and I think you talked about commerciality and capacity within the business. One of the key issues we find continually is about that capacity within businesses to change their approach and to actually change their thought processes. So I'm just interested in that.
8 of us that were taken on over the last 6 months have all, I mean, I've come from public and private sector, but some of them are just private sector, and that's not about saying that's better than anything else. It's not. It's bringing a range of skills and capabilities to have those discussions with staff within the teams.
Bina, have you got, I suppose obviously First Arc have been through this quite recently. From Circle's perspective, so you've been going through this for longer, but do you have any about the cultural change that you guys have been through in the last few years?
I think it's the same. It's a rolling, it's never going to stop. We went through this about 3 years ago, quite a change in terms of, okay, stop doing what we're doing, let's think, why are we doing this? What's the benefit? What's the value of this? And we started working on how do we measure what we're doing, basically. We are currently going through a very large restructure at the moment, and it is, again, looking at the benefits, looking at what's going up commercially, what's happening, the changes happening in the social sector. How do we change behaviours? A lot of our work is similar, so around the behaviours of individuals, behaviour of people, what should we be delivering? At the end of the day, our customer is our customer. All we do should be invested back into our customer for the best service. So similar, again, we've had a tranche of sort of commercial sector people coming in, but again, social sector people coming in, because you need the different skills. Key one that we've experienced over the last 2 years, we've had about 46 apprentices in-house within our services, within finance, legal, governance, housing services. And the difference they bring with thoughts and their understanding of what should change has made a big difference to us in terms of just changing the focus of staff who've been around for a long time, learning from them. So that's been really good.
And I suppose, Lizzie, I mean, when we talk about SUK, about impact measurement and about kind of proving what you're doing, but also how you improve what you do as well, and how you look to get better going forward, do you think the impact work that you've been doing has helped organisations to think about how they do things better and from a cultural perspective as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's always a kind of iterative process in terms of measuring impact and understanding what you're measuring and informing decisions. Like, it's very hard to do it perfectly the first time. I think everyone kind of learns that. But some of the conversations I've had with people who have started using the HACT, you know, the Social Value Bank, the value calculator, that it just starts conversations happening internally. It's not a perfect silver bullet in terms of giving you exactly the information that you need, but what it does do is starts people to question, well, why are we doing this? Do we actually know that this makes a difference? And also, I think somebody said to me that whilst the values in the Social Value Bank are limited, right, there's 53 values in there or something, and they capture some of the change that you're affecting through your work, but they don't capture other areas. But I was told that it just generally can start that ethos or that thinking of measuring, of collecting data and measuring and thinking and actually just starting to evaluate why. So I think it should be a good start of the journey for everyone, if not have all the answers that you need.
We had a question here. Can you pass the microphone over? Is that okay? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ethel from Business in the Community. I've got a question around measuring the outcomes. It's key to entering those outcomes in the social value calculator, but at the same time you were mentioning how you ask your delivery partners to measure. Is there any support you offer them in terms of how to measure, and how do you either have a specific budget or other ways of supporting them in order for them to gather that information and that you are sure that it's good quality information?
I mean, in terms of the procurements, when we're working with our providers or people who are sort of basically working with us in partnership, we actually do a lot, because it's a partnership approach, we do meet them on a regular basis. So we actually have a monitoring system in place in terms of how they're doing, what's happening, what the hiccups, how can we help. So it's more just collaboration in how they deliver. We provide the monitoring in terms of the measuring for them. And they do the management at the other side. So it's a very joint approach because they don't have the resources or sometimes the ability to do that work. We need their support to do what we need them to do for our customers. So it is literally just working together. If it's about funding other organisations or social enterprises, again, working with them in terms of the business plan to see what are you aiming to do, what is the impact, what kind of things do you need to do, and then helping them look at the values and helping them identify that aspect.
Yes, very much the same, but also our contracts are fairly tight in terms of when we're procuring and commissioning. So we've had a lot of advice around the contracts, and I suppose I'm quite hard on these things that, we're going to give you some money and it's public money. I want to see what the outcome is for that. Now, you might need support in being able to report back to us on those outcomes, but it's actually, you need to start helping people do it for themselves, is what I'm saying. So, yeah, we do give some support. Actually, at some stage, they're going to have to start doing it for themselves. And if you are giving funding, might want to build in some capacity building into that and getting the systems in. But if they're going to have to be sustainable, they are themselves going to have to take a different approach because they'll need to bring more money in. So you're working with a partner. So it's about that, but it's also allowing them to become independent and say, yes, we can do that ourselves as well. So you can only take them along so far. Otherwise, it creates another dependency. So how do you get away from that dependency into one where you can work together, collaborate, rather than be dependent on each other? Okay.
Lizzie, anything to add to that? Or?
No, I mean,
No?
I was just going to say, I think Helen kind of covered it, but it's just getting it agreed very early on that's going to be one of the requirements, because I don't think anyone should, not have to report, but obviously it's harder if you're halfway down the road and you're trying to collect data. Yeah, so just earlier the better.
Another question? Someone putting their hand up or moving their programme? Someone moving their programme.
Knock us off the bat,
Yeah, we nearly lost Helen before going off the back of the stage. Before that happens and we have a serious accident, I suppose something I wanted to ask, and something that came up in the Communities Count research we did, which looked at local authorities and housing associations. And there was quite a big difference, or one of the differences between the two groups was that for local authorities, the Act was, or the Social Value Act, was quite a big marker of change in terms of, we've never had to do this before, suddenly we have to look at this, what does it mean? It was a bit different with housing because the response of a lot of housing associations, particularly smaller ones, but across the board as well, not in an indignant way, but we've been doing this already and this is something that we've always done. Of course we've done this, the Act doesn't change anything. How important do you think the Act has been for your organisations in terms of changing the way you've approached this? And you've talked a bit about this already, Bina, but maybe you could say a bit more.
It's true. I mean, the Act in reality has only helped, being quite straightforward, has helped ensure that when we go to procurement, they can't say, no, we can't do anything. That's all. In reality, that's all it's helped. Having said that, the Act is very loose, so it's more about us making sure that as part of this, you will answer these questions and they will be scored, and there is a weighting to it. So it's building that in. In terms of the work we do anyway is getting staff focused, and I think you spoke about that earlier, Helen, is getting the staff to realise why we're doing this. Stop. You know, don't keep delivering youth projects for the sake of youth projects, but they're great. What's the impact of it? Why are we delivering this? They may be that money could be invested in something much more critical for that community. So it's getting staff to think about it, and it's helped that process for us in terms of just doing what we do for the sake of doing what we do.
I don't actually quite think it's fair around local authorities. I think many of us have been doing this for many years. It's just, and they maybe called it slightly different things. You know, now we have got some sort of definition, but it is there. I think with local authorities, particularly in the north, where we've always had to, if you like, increase the social and economic value for any contracts, we've done it for a long time. The problem with local authorities often is the complexity and the amount of commissioning teams, etc., that you might have. And to some extent, you have to get them to recognise they probably have been doing it anyway in different guises over different times. I think with a local authority, it's probably the complexity that makes it more difficult to embed. I think with housing companies tending to be smaller, that's why they probably are doing it. I think, again, most people have been doing it. It's just, you know, I've worked on big government contracts such as BSF. We had, you know, embedded KPIs, and as a private sector, we lost our investment if we didn't meet our social value KPIs. So I think it's always been there. I think what we're trying to do is get to a better definition and get the different sectors to work better together on it. That would be my view on the things.
I think just from working with housing providers that it's just formalising it has made it just a huge enabler in terms of measuring social value generally. Like, I think everyone's been doing it in different guises and knows it's the right thing to do, but just having that formal kind of bit of legislation, there's another driver to kind of justify putting the effort in and actually doing it properly.
Any other questions from anyone? Does anyone here work with housing associations? Are there any social enterprises here who do work with? Oh, yeah. How have you found working with your? Sorry, it's a microphone there. Yeah.
Yeah, I work with to help funding through various mechanisms, and working with HACT actually to look at measuring social impact, and in particular social impact bonds. Being a small company, it's hard to penetrate those organisations, and sort of trying to work the partnership way is proving stronger than trying to just do it on an individual basis. I think that's a strong message I've heard, is the partnership, and that's what's working for us at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, just behind you. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I'm from East Thames Group. We're a housing association. We use the system and have done from the beginning. And I think tying it back to this morning, I think the difficulty is, yes, it's embedded in our sector, but the rest of the world, if you like, is still playing catch up and still defining things a different way. And I think the biggest challenge out of today is to come out with the one language, you know, so that we don't turn it into something different, so that when we're talking to some of the larger companies we procure with, that they understand what it is we're talking about. So, you know, at the moment we call it social impact. This is calling it social value. Social return on investment is another arm of it. You know, let's all just come up. I mean, I know we won't do it today, but I think, you know, if the outcome of today is to say, do you know what, let's work on using one language, then we'll get there a lot quicker, because we're wasting time trying to define what each of us are doing. That wasn't a question, that was a comment.
It's a fair comment.
That's my style.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the point on language. So we SDUK run a programme called Health and Social Value, which is working with NHS England, but working in a number of areas around the country. It's in its second year now, to help clinical commissioning groups within healthcare to develop their social value policies, but to do it working with local social enterprises and voluntary delivery organisations. And it's been very successful in terms of the way they've helped come up with stuff, but the biggest challenge has been language, actually. So how does a big commissioner, when they talk about this is what we mean by social value, and small voluntary provider or social enterprise says, well, we're talking about this, and they realise halfway through they're talking about exactly the same thing. But that can take a while to get to, and it is absolutely critical, I agree. Any other can be a comment as well as a question. Comments are good too. Yes, Mick, sorry.
Do I have to no, Mick May from Blue Sky. Years ago, before I grew up, I did part 1 accounting. And it strikes me that social impact measurement is in the same place that accounting was in before goodwill was, or a widespread mechanism was invented to measure goodwill. And it strikes me that accounting firms, you can often get the valuation of goodwill wrong, but you still have a measurement which is accepted for something that you can't put a financial value on necessarily. Mm-hmm. And I've always wondered how soon it is before the social impact industry is going to come up with something which does that.
Lizzie?
How
far off? A couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Well, actually, by the way, sorry, somebody said that I think they have. I don't think people have. So what I'm talking about is you can value the value of a job relatively easy, and you can look at the value of keeping someone out of prison relatively easy. But where you move into something like well-being, it strikes me we're right in the middle of the territory that is goodwill. And it doesn't matter whether you call well-being 1 quid or 2 quid or 15 quid. It's just that there isn't a widely accepted mechanism at the moment.
It's true. I mean, wellbeing valuation is kind of gaining momentum across different areas. So, I mean, I'd obviously think that could potentially be the answer, but it's at very early stages. Like you say, it is still being developed and the methodology's in its early days. I think it's an interesting comment to compare social impact measurement to financial accounting, because it does happen quite a lot, you know, that people want social accounting, for want of a kind of more generic phrase, to be as accurate and as straightforward, if you like, as financial accounting. I'm not an accountant, which I'm sure you'd probably guess, but I think it's obviously a much more difficult thing to do because you're measuring things that aren't tangible and have more subjective ideas of value around them. It's not a very good answer, but it's a comment.
Have we got a... Thanks.
Eddie Finch, excuse me, from Buzzicott. I am an accountant, and it's very flattering.
Fantastic.
Very, very flattering that you think that we're able to scientifically value goodwill. No. But I think the issue is the same, that there are methodologies, and SROI is a methodology that people can sign up to, and it involves collecting data and making sense of it. But goodwill comes down to how much you want it. And with social value, it's the same thing. At the end of the day, it's how much do you want different outcomes. And that was very much a comment.
Can I just,
sure.
In terms of that's why when I was tasked with show us something, how we're spending our money, I stuck to SROI methodology, because in terms of the finance directors, they could justifiably see, or management could see, okay, you can't play with that. That is a value. It is the harder part now is, as we said, we're working on the well-being, but it's very subjective, and trying to get our finance guys to understand, yeah, but where's that come from and why, is really difficult. But the fact that there is a methodology out there, we're not going to reinvent something else out of that.
Yeah, sorry, should we go forward? Yeah.
Hi, Michelle Benson, SSE. It's another comment. I think it's interesting because if you're a single issue organisation, like say employment, you measure that and you can consistently measure it across your entire organisation. I think, especially being a school of social entrepreneurs, having lots of different issues, and like a housing association, we measure an issue quite well, but when you roll it up and you're trying to compare different issues, that's when it all goes horribly wrong. So I think it's really helpful.
Thank you. And
I think that's one of the strengths of wellbeing evaluation, is that you are comparing like with like, regardless of the outcomes that you're actually considering.
Right, so my name's Robert Ashton, and I came here today wearing 2 hats, and I'm feeling increasingly schizophrenic. So one hat is with Swarm Apprenticeships, which is a business I started, and we're working with housing associations. It's very clear that the stuff we talked about so far today is really useful in helping us to value what we do in terms of getting bright, neat kids into apprenticeships from social housing stock. That's quite straightforward. The other hat I've got is I'm doing some work with Community Shop, CIC, who set up, they basically offer cheap food to people in return for commitment to improve their lot. And so all this methodology, I could see how in an ideal world I could take that to somewhere in the government and say, will you pay these guys to do this work? But so the payment for social value seems to be quite clear cut and quite almost a simple transaction with a housing association. But I still can't see how I can do it with the government. And maybe that's just me being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
When you say with government,
anybody in government.
Anyone in government.
Well, it's quite easy to see how, funding coming through housing associations can be applied in this kind of way. But I just don't see this level of sophistication of debate with people like DWP or DCLG.
Yeah.
Daniel Fujiwara, heads up Symetrica, he was head of cost-benefit analysis at DWP previously, and they were using wellbeing valuation as a way to volunteer adult learning. A way to value adult learning and volunteering. So it's definitely an approach that's used within government. And what you're effectively doing is a cost-benefit analysis with wellbeing valuation, right? So you'll understand the inputs it takes to make the outcome happen, and then you value the outcome in a consistent methodology. So it's a very kind of neat cost-benefit analysis, if you like. So there's no reason why it wouldn't work in any context, not just housing.
I think in my experience, I think that understanding is growing. We've just got a fairly new project in Liverpool, the cathedrals, and DWP and many other government departments were at that launch, and they have started talking about it. But I think it's about us providing some real tangible evidence on what is it saving. I mean, if you're talking to government, you do have to show them what have we saved them, how have we done that, and actually, can it be scaled up, and what's the impact on those people. So I think it's just, I think maybe because as a sector we're still having discussions about what social value is. We have lots of examples, but we need to put those examples into a format that government and civil servants, etc., can understand. And also that's going to be around money, isn't it? I would suggest. Yeah.
I think it's important just to acknowledge that difference between the primary and secondary benefits of any work like this. Those primary benefits are benefiting the individual, and you would use wellbeing valuation to value that. Those secondary benefits of saving government cash through services, NHS, police, whatever, that's a different thing. That's a different sort of value accruing to a different stakeholder, if you like.
I suppose what I'm saying is important for organisations, because that's how they may attract funding. And that is very important in terms of public service reform, etc. You're saying that you are making a saving, and you'll be doing something, you're getting some really positive outcomes for those people. Actually, you're saving the government, and it's those sort of examples that we need to start building up. Actually, primary, secondary, whatever.
But you can, but separating that can increase your case, because if you're benefiting more than one.
Okay. Some lively debate at the end there. We're going to have to call it a day there, I'm afraid, because it is definitely lunchtime now. So thank you very much to all of our speakers. Thank you very much for that. And lunch is back upstairs where you went for networking earlier, so thank you.